Hey, horror fans, welcome back to Jay versus Horror. And guys, today we're starting a new venture. We're going to be trying to name the top 10 horror films of the last 20 years from 2001 to 2020. And the way we're going to do that, guys, is we're going to take each year, starting with 2001, and we're going to do a top 10 for each year. And then when we reach 2020, we should be close to the end of the year, and I'll do a top 10 for this year. We'll throw them all into a boiling pot, and I will use my J rating system to decide what 10 movies make the top 10 for the last 2 decades, the last 20 years, folks. So let's get started. Let's do the top 10 horror movies of 2001. At number 10, Suicide Club. Suicide Club, known in Japan as Suicide Circle, is a 2001 Japanese independent satirical horror film written and directed by Sion Sono. The film explores a wave of seemingly unconnected suicides that strike Japan and the efforts of the police to determine the reasons behind the strange behavior. It's a fun film. There's a bunch of mass suicides. People jump in front of trains, they do all kinds of crazy stuff. And we see the cops running around trying to figure out what's going on. And they believe that there is something known as the Suicide Club. And there's some red herrings in the film, but we don't actually get any real answer towards the end. It's a satirical answer, is what it is. I don't want to give the film away because it does have kind of a surprise ending. I thought to an extent where when you see where it's going, it has something to say about consumerism and how people, similar to films like The Stuff and things like that, how people get wrapped up in certain things and start to do crazy stuff. Uh, the movie has an interesting plot twist about halfway through where we meet like a cult leader, and we start to believe that this guy is the reason behind the Suicide Club, and he does some freaky stuff in the movie. Uh, but all in all, yeah, it's just a fun movie, guys. I wouldn't take this one too seriously. I know suicide is a hot button topic, but in this film, it's not portrayed as something that people should do. It's portrayed as something that a herd mentality might come up with as a solution to weird stuff. We've all heard weird stuff before, right? They used to say if you played the Beatles backwards, the Beatles albums that said John is dead. Similar to things like that is what we get into with the Suicide Club. At number 9, Ichi the Killer. Now, I know right now a lot of you guys are probably saying, Jay, this is not a horror film. Well, it's close enough for me. There's a lot of films that are close enough for me, and so I claim them. It's kind of like cousins of horror. And Ichi the Killer definitely fits into that. It's a Japanese action crime filled film directed by Takashi Miike and written by Sakichi Sato. Uh, it's a fun movie. It's an extremely violent gangland movie where we have a guy who's fairly normal. Well, I say fairly normal. He is manipulated psychologically into becoming a homicidal maniac who commits unspeakable atrocities. And so, yeah, the film is fun and a great ending here, I thought. Uh, I'm not a big fan of Miyake's films like this. I'm more of a fan of his films like Audition and Visitor Q, things like that. But this is a fun film and definitely not one to be missed. At number 8, I have one. This one's kind of interesting, I'll admit. Mimic 2. And the reason why I say it's interesting is because this is a direct to video movie. I mean, to be fair, it's nowhere near as good as the first film. But in this era, they did a lot of these where they would have a film that was mildly successful, then they'd wait a few years, and instead of coming back to the theater, we'd get part 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. We would get straight to video or DVD in this era. And so that's where Mimic 2 falls, but it has a decent story. It picks up a few years after the first one leaves off, and it also kind of has a little bit of an open-ended finale that I thought was kind of interesting. And then we do get Mimic 3 eventually, which it kind of goes downhill, every time a little bit. But in this one, we discovered that these creatures can not only mimic the way humans look, they can kind of mimic some of their emotions too. So the story takes kind of a different turn towards the end. And it's one of the better straight to DVD sequels that they've made. Not a lot of stars in it. Does have Eddie Albert, the old time actor, but that's about it for Mimic 2. It's a decent film though. It's not, if it's one that if it's actually on a Sunday afternoon or something, I'll still take the time to watch it. Let's move on. At number 7, we have Jason X. So by now, you guys can probably tell that 2001 is a pretty thin year for horror films. And as we go on, I think you'll see that horror made a big comeback towards the end of this decade, 2008, 2009. Those years are really full of movies. But early on, we didn't have a lot, and I don't think Jason X is that bad. It's a kind of a placeholder film that was made. They did as far back as Friday the 13th Part 7. They were trying to come up with an idea for Jason versus Freddy. And that film became Jason versus Carrie. And then, of course, they did Jason Takes Manhattan. And then Jason Goes to Hell, where we're promised there will be a face-off between Freddy and Jason. And so before they could, really get that project going, we kind of had this placeholder movie called Jason X because they owned the property, might as well try to make some money off of it. And they kicked in a budget here of about 11 or 12 million dollars. I think they made 7 or 8 million profit at the box office. So it wasn't a failure like everyone would have you believe. It's also done very well since then, like DVD sales and things like that. But we get a futuristic look at Jason in this one, and it's several years into the future. I think 2455. They come back to the Earth and they discover Jason, and of course he is in the Crystal Lake research facility because there's a giant scientific research facility at Crystal Lake that we did not know about until this. According to this, in the year 2010, Jason was captured and put into this research facility where they tried to attempt several different ways to kill him, and nothing worked. And so when he's discovered 445 years later, in 2455, that gets a little confusing. Earth has become too polluted to support life, and humans have moved on to a new planet. But Earth 2 Professor Braithwaite Lowe has decided to come back and check out what's going on Earth. And of course, they run into Jason. They decide to try to take him back with them. And once they get him on the ship, the fun begins when Jason, of course, comes back to life like he always does and starts taking people out aboard the ship. There's some fun stuff in this movie. One of my top 10 kills is in this movie where it's basically a hologram, a holodeck like they have on Star Trek, that they've got Jason trapped inside, and he beats one of the campers inside this simulation with one of the other campers. Very fun part to the film. And of course we get Uber Jason here, which, if nothing else, was worth it just for the action figures that they've made of this, right? Jason in space is a fun concept. Unfortunately, the cliche in horror is that space is where horror franchises go to die, right? Like Leprechaun and Hellraiser went there, and usually like the last theatrical releases of a franchise will end up in space somehow, unless you're Machete, and then you get there by number 2, right? But yeah, I don't have any hate for Jason X. I know a lot of people enjoy it even more than I do. I think it's, as far as the franchise goes, quality wise, I think it's in the middle somewhere. It's middle to the back of the pack, I would say. So let's move on, guys. At number 6, we have another Asian horror film, Pulse. Now, this is the Asian version that I'm talking about, too, guys, from 2001. I'm not talking about the terrible remake that they did a few years later here in the United States. Pulse is a fun movie, and it kind of plays similar to something like Pontypool, where there is an infection going around between electronic devices. So it does also have it is one of those J-horror films, similar to The Grudge and The Ring, and it has that kind of feel. But it also has a weird moodiness to it. Where we see people committing suicide for no reason, and people are basically passing around an infectious haunting, similar to something like It Follows. I mean, if you have it and you're able to pass it on to somebody through electronics, then they have it, and so it's an infection and a haunting at the same time. And I think the Japanese version is actually pretty spooky. I like this film a lot. Uh, that's Pulse. So moving on. At number 5, we have 13 Ghosts. Yes, I like this remake. I think that this remake is actually better than the original. If you go back and watch the original 13 Ghosts, it's really hokey. It's one of the William Castle gimmick films where there was a gimmick to it. And at this time, all these films were kind of like that. The science fiction and horror films back then, they all had a gimmick. The Tingler, they would put, a little electrodes in people's chairs and give them a little shock while they were in the theater. They would also plant people in the audience to jump up and scream and act like whatever the monster was, or the ghost was that had them. And then so in 13 Ghosts, what we had was Ghost-O-Vision. It was basically like you got some glasses when you went in there and you could see the ghost in the movie. So I went back and rewatched it a couple times without Ghost-O-Vision, I can say. And it's not a strong movie. I mean, without this gimmick, there's really nothing that strong to it. And all the changes that they make in the 2001 remake work, in my opinion. I like the addition of the Matthew Lillard character as being over the top. And, of course, F. Murray Abraham. We got Tony Shalhoub, Elizabeth Shannon Elizabeth, I mean. And so it's a good cast, Raw Digga. Good cast, strong cast, Frances McDormand even. So, yeah, it just goes on and on with the cast. And the ghosts in this are great. The effects are awesome. This is the movie that, you want the first one to be, even though going back it's not going to be that intense. This one's pretty scary, and I like how they incorporate the Ghost-O-Vision into the movie. Now, the people in the movie have to have the glasses to see the ghost. And it's not just the audience that needs these, cheesy glasses to see what's going on. Really like this one. I think I like House on Haunted Hill too, but I think the original with House on Haunted Hill is the better film, where the remake is just kind of like, wouldn't it be fun if we got a bunch of actors together and remade House on Haunted Hill? With 13 Ghosts, I think it's the opposite. I think the remake is the much stronger film. Although the original is very iconic in its own right, and I would never put it down for any reason. I'm just saying, for me, if I'm going to go watch one of the versions, I'm going to watch the new one. Although I do feel like the end is a little too sweet. It's a little too Cinnamon Toast Crunch for me. It's a little too sweet. But, moving on. At number 4, I have Jeepers Creepers. And I wondered about even putting this film on the list because I know there's so much hate out there for it, especially... I mean, I don't think there's really hate for the film. I think the hate comes from the director, and what we know about Victor Salva or whatever now is that, he's a pedophile. He was convicted of his crime and all that. And yes, I don't, want to get political about how people feel about that. If you serve your time, you serve your time, but that doesn't mean we should, if you live down the street from me and you bake bread and I find out you're a pedophile, I'm probably not going to come back down there to buy any more bread from you, even though you served your time. I'm not obligated to buy bread from you. You know what I mean? I don't have to, just because you served your debt to society, doesn't mean I have to be a patron of yours anymore. And just like with Silva, I can't remember how you pronounce his name there, but yeah, he's a sicko, disgusting, John Wayne Gacy lookalike, and it's not a fun topic to get on, and it's terrible that it's ruined a couple good films. But yeah, I still think the film, for what it was in that era, 2001, it holds up pretty good. We didn't have anything. I mean, like I just talked about Jason X, so we're at the very end of the Jason run, and there weren't a lot of other iconic, scary characters that were up on the big screen in these lean years. And so Jeepers Creepers came along, and I think people kind of attached to the creeper. And the first film I thought was pretty good. It plays a little bit strange to me, almost like it's in like a really long episode of an anthology series or something, and not necessarily so great at, there's not as much background here. We're just kind of thrown into what's going on, but we do get some background in the sequels, I'll say that. But yeah, I thought Jeepers Creepers was pretty strong. We got Justin Long here, pretty good cast all the way around, and the Creeper worked. I thought there was some interesting stuff, especially the part where the cops are tailing him and he's able to run off the road and he gets the guy's head and yeah, that's a great scene right there in the middle of the highway. Uh, the creeper he also has like a Terminator scene at the end of the movie where he's just like, I'm getting what I want. If you have Du have Sarakana, that's basically what that scene is. He goes into the police station to get what he wants. And I thought the end scene was great because we know we're open for a franchise after that. We know that the creeper will go on. I kind of hate that they put him on this timetable. This every 27 years or 23 years, whatever it was. I can't remember. One of them is Pennywise, and the other one's the Jeepers Creeper, the creeper. And but however many years it is, he comes back. I wish they hadn't done that. They put him on a timetable, so now there's all this weird. It has to go back in time because we can't do another one yet because we just saw a story about that. And I think if you don't put him on that kind of maybe once a year, you say he comes back once a year, that would be great, But when you make it once every 20 something years, then you have to start playing with timelines to make anything work after the first one. So yeah, but I am a fan of the original. It's terrible everything that's come out about that director and the kind of creep that he actually is in real life, right? But let's move on, guys. We're down to our top three from 2001. And at number three, I have Trouble Every Day. It's a fun, erotic French horror film. And has Vincent Gallo in it. And it's a really fun movie. I mean, like, I say it's fun. For me, what I mean when I say fun is twisted. It's a twisted movie. And it is a vampire movie, but it takes a little while to get to that. And basically, what it is, we have a doctor here who his wife has become a vampire. He's got her locked up in the house. He's trying to figure out how to stop the situation. And then they have an old friend who they met years ago who's kind of in town trying to look them up, and everybody intersects. And it's just a good vampire movie, great erotic vampire movie from France. This is right where France is gearing up. They're gearing up for the French extreme movement. You got this film, and then you got Irreversible, and then after that you have Haute Tension, and then it moves on from there. We go to things like The Horde and Inside and Martyrs and Frontiers and Mutants and many more great films from France from this era. And this film is kind of like right there where it's in the kickoff zone. I enjoy it a lot. I know a lot of people haven't seen it. I highly suggest you go check it out. Trouble Every Day, great soundtrack, great film, good stuff all the way around on that one at number three. So at number two, guys, number two and number one were pretty easy for me to pick out of this crowd. But as far as what order I wanted to put them in, I have my own reasons, and I feel like a lot of people may disagree with me. At number two, I have The Others, starring Nicole Kidman, and I am a fan of this movie. I enjoyed it a lot. It has kind of the gothic atmosphere. It's very dark, very heavy-handed. But it also came out just 2 years after. It felt like less than that even. 2 years after The Sixth Sense. It has a very similar twist. It has a very similar feel to the old movies like The Innocents and films that, like Turn of the Screw that take on those stories. It's really reminiscent of a lot of things that you've already seen when you see this movie. I think the things that work here or that make it, stand above just being a run-of-the-mill film like that is that Nicole Kidman's performance in it is just outstanding. And, the mystery of the kids, what's going on, I think it's really easy to figure out. It's like too easy to figure out, especially when we just saw a big screen film like this do a similar twist just a couple years before, I think. But it's one of those reactionary films. It's like, when they made Die Hard, they're going to make Under Siege and Passenger 57, and they're going to do that to death until it cannot make any more money. And this is where that kind of felt like this type of movie to me, where Sixth Sense was hugely successful. So Tom Cruise, his production company, went out and purchased this specifically to make because of the success of The Sixth Sense. And, it was given or put forth as a project for Nicole Kidman to star in. Thank God she was in it, because I don't know, like, without the great performances, I don't know how well this one holds up. It probably falls to the back of this list, probably 7 or 8 if you've got somebody else in there who's just not. This is Nicole in her prime too. I mean, this is like before Cold Mountain and stuff like that, where she's just killing it every year. And so yeah, great film. I think it's got some genuinely good spooky moments in it, and great performance from Nicole Kidman anchors the others at number 2. And at number 1, I have Session 9, guys. And I know some people are going to disagree with me on this one. A lot of people don't like this movie. They say nothing happens. I think, pound for pound, when you weigh in atmosphere and creepiness and all that stuff, Session 9 comes out on top by far. It is very creepy, in my opinion. There's so much good stuff in here. We have this team of asbestos removers, and we have David Caruso and Josh Lucas and a few other stars here. And we see that they go into this abandoned mental asylum that actually was still there until a couple years after they made this film. And there they become, is it a haunting? Is it a possession? Is there a killer in the basement? What's going on in this movie, right? So that's what it's all about, is trying to figure out what's going on. And then there's just some other creepy stuff. They find these tapes in the basement of a person who had multiple personality disorder, being, these therapy tapes, and they're labeled sessions 1 through 9. And as we go, we hear the different personalities of this person, and we start to anticipate the more violent personalities which come towards the end. And with a big surprise, I think it works on every single level that it's supposed to work on. And some people have said, well, I figured this part out before it happened, or I figured that part out. Well, I don't think that's uncommon. We're adults. We've seen 500 movies like this. I mean, it takes a real hell of a twist, almost a twist on a twist at this point, for any of us to be, astounded by anything. You really have to, if you're going to take the twist as literally being something that you don't see coming, that knocks you off your feet, it's going to have to be pretty impressive by this era. We've pretty much seen it all, and we've even seen the twist on the twist. People have tried to make it work every way they can, and I think that this one, even though I kind of saw what was coming, I wasn't 100% sure who it was happening to until the end. And then I think there's a scene there that, because we're shown this one scene several times, and we're not sure why it's impactful until the end, when it becomes very impactful. And so, yeah, I like Session 9. I think out of the films on this list, it's the only one that probably has a real chance to make it into that top 10 of the last 20 years. And I don't know how good that chance is. I'll say that. There's going to be some years where there may be 2 films or 3 films from that top end that are definitely going to make the top 10 for the last 20 years. And there's some years where it's just the films aren't as strong, and there's some years where it's going to be impossible to almost choose between the films, and even the top 10, because it becomes, some years are so jam-packed it becomes completely subjective. There's 25, 30 movies that could fit into that list, and it's just about where you want to put them. So guys, I'm trying to be faithful to everyone and be honest about my choices, and I think I've given some pretty logical reasons why I placed everything where I did. And I know I probably missed one of your favorites or a couple favorites out there. And if you guys can think of anything I missed, please leave it in the comment section below. And if I feel like you're right, if it's just something I totally overlooked and missed, we will reconsider that film when we're doing the top 10 of the last 20 years. And I'll give you a shout out for bringing it up. So that's all we got for today, guys. I hope you had fun. We're going to do one of these every few days until we knock out this whole past 2 decades. We'll do one for every year of the last 20 years, including 2020 at the end, and then we will do the top 10 of the last 20 years. Guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you the next time we got something worth talking about. Bye.